breaking updates. Who murdered Epstein? Not yelled, not reiterated, simply 4 distinct words. In that exact instance, Pam Bondi became paralyzed because that specific inquiry was absolutely not supposed to be raised during a live television broadcast. Furthermore, it certainly was not intended to receive a response. She had successfully navigated Florida legal battles, nationwide political races, and grueling confirmation panels that would have shattered weaker political figures. Just 47 minutes prior, Kennedy hadn't inquired about a single detail regarding Epstein. He allowed the chamber to loosen up initially. He permitted Bondi to believe this session remained completely within her grasp. However, when Kennedy ultimately leaned toward his mic, the whole room became motionless. It was not the courteous hush of a standard official gathering, but rather the gasping, primal quietness that people experience moments before an unalterable event occurs. Kennedy did not commence with the Epstein topic. He began with a much more minor subject, an issue that appeared innocent, yet it absolutely was not. It was not about financial plans, border security guidelines, or the typical political spectacle that Bondi had dedicated weeks to readying herself for. He initiated the dialogue by discussing a magistrate located in Wisconsin. Attorney General Kennedy remarked, utilizing his slow and calculated Louisiana accent, resembling an individual possessing infinite amounts of time. This magistrate they apprehended in Wisconsin. She was violating national legislation. Correct? Bondi carefully gestured in agreement, verifying the statement. She had been assisting an unregistered migrant in evading national detainment. The apprehension was legitimate, Bondi replied rapidly. It was excessively rapid, resembling an individual attempting to push past a topic before observers caught on. Kennedy grinned, and that exact grin caused a pair of Democratic aides sitting in the third tier to trade an anxious look, because they identified what it meant. Kennedy was not truly asking concerning the magistrate. He was constructing a foundation. Each inquiry served as another stone in a barrier that Bondi could not currently perceive, yet was on the verge of colliding directly with. As citizens of America, Kennedy went on, his tone remaining unhurried, are we permitted to select which regulations we obey? Bondi responded, no, absolutely not. If you serve as an attorney general, are you allowed to determine that you prefer not to respond to specific inquiries in front of Congress? Her jaw clenched almost unnoticeably. She stated no once more. Impartial treatment beneath the legislation. However, that is the exact moment everything shifted. Given that Bondi had just secured herself within a response, she would remain incapable of breaking free. Now, all that Kennedy needed to execute was to enforce that standard upon her. Next arrived the transition. Attorney General Bondi, Kennedy stated, reaching for an item beneath the desk. Subsequently, Kennedy uttered a moniker that immediately altered the atmosphere of the space. Jeffrey Epstein. It did not sound like an inquiry. Bondi's digits, which had previously been laying relaxed upon the desk, pushed firmly down on the exterior. A litigator observing from the media balcony later mentioned it served as the initial giveaway. That nuanced, automatic pushing of the hands, the physical form attempting to secure itself before her intellect even digested the incoming peril. Yes, Senator, Bondi stated. I do. You pledged complete openness regarding the Epstein documents. Total revelation. Those constituted your precise phrases. Kennedy hesitated, allowing the statement to linger. Then the Department of Justice issued a mere sliver of what existed within those documents. A meticulously chosen sliver. He glanced upward from his written points. What occurred to total revelation, Attorney General? Kennedy turned to the subsequent sheet. How numerous individuals has your agency questioned again concerning Epstein's passing since you assumed your position? Bondi failed to reply immediately. How many watchmen? How numerous managers? How many bureaucrats who authorized the initial sequence of events? Because if nobody was interrogated, then absolutely nothing underwent re-evaluation. Kennedy refused to elevate his tone. He lacked the need to do so. The underlying meaning was already apparent. Either the probe had been launched again, or Bondi had embraced the initial narrative without altering it. The chamber became motionless once more, because currently this was no longer regarding outdated documents. It centered on whether Bondi had truly accomplished anything whatsoever. Bondi grasped for procedural explanations once again. Evaluations, protocols, continuous collaboration. Yet Kennedy had already unveiled the genuine issue. If 0 people had been interrogated, then the only thing Bondi was shielding was the previous narrative. Bondi responded promptly. Judicial jargon, protocols, complicated descriptions, yet absolutely none of it addressed the actual inquiry. She referenced judicial mandates, grand jury confidentiality guidelines, and casualty privacy safeguards technically meticulous, yet wholly elusive. Kennedy refused to blink. "Attorney General, I desire to question you regarding something exceptionally straightforward." He placed his writing instrument down. Whenever Kennedy places down his writing instrument, individuals focus intently. Jeffrey Epstein perished inside a national installation. An installation subject to the oversight of your agency, subject to the oversight of every attorney general prior to yourself. He tilted ahead marginally. Did Jeffrey Epstein suspend himself? The quietness that ensued spanned 11 seconds. 11 seconds wherein one could listen to the climate control machinery buzzing over the Senate hall. 11 seconds wherein Bondi's visage rotated through an expression that resembled computation, followed by poise, followed by the meticulous construction of a response that would absolutely not, could not, represent the reality. Every person inside that space was genuinely listening for it. "Senator," she remarked at last. The formal conclusion was self-termination via suspension. That represents the finding that was established by, "That is not what I questioned you about." Kennedy's tone failed to elevate. That constituted the frightening aspect. He remained thoroughly composed. "I inquired whether you reckon he suspended himself. You, individually, the Attorney General of the American nation, who oversees the files, who manages the probe, who promised the citizens of America she would supply them with the complete reality." He angled his skull marginally. "Do you reckon it?" Bondi's jaw parted, then shut. She grasped for her hydration tumbler, an action so restrained it appeared practiced, and nevertheless, her grip was not totally firm. She consumed a calculated drink, positioned the tumbler downward, and provided a response that was structurally 17 terms in length, while conveying absolutely zero. An experienced journalist in the primary row ceased typing. She subsequently informed peers that this was the exact second she realized something was amiss. Not regarding Kennedy's inquiry, but concerning the response Bondi declined to provide. Kennedy remained incomplete. "Your justice agency," he persisted, extracting a paper from the portfolio, "has been resting upon evidence from the Epstein probe for several months. Evidence that survivor advocates, judicial specialists, and personnel of this panel have officially solicited." He elevated a solitary sheet. "This constitutes a document dispatched to your department, marked 11 weeks prior, soliciting a comprehensive breakdown of what continues to be confidential within the Epstein documents and the reasons why." He positioned it upon the desk, separating them, as though he were placing a ruling. "Has your department replied to this document?" The complexion that departed Bondi's visage at that instant, journalists would subsequently debate whether it occurred prior to or following the inquiry, was apparent from the third tier. Her lead administrator, situated immediately to her rear, squeezed his mouth shut and stared toward the ground. "We are progressing, utilizing the suitable pathways to Attorney General." Kennedy's tone at last possessed a sharpness, not wrath, but an element more frigid than wrath, the pitch of an individual who had previously witnessed the conclusion and was merely guiding her toward it. 11 weeks, and your department has failed to reply to an official congressional solicitation concerning the passing of a male who smuggled youths to several of the most influential individuals on this globe. He hesitated. "Does that resonate like openness to you?" The space failed to erupt. That is what individuals misunderstood when they characterized what occurred subsequently. It failed to detonate. It squeezed together, as though the oxygen was being steadily pushed out of the hall, generating something heavy and oxygen-deprived in its wake. 3 GOP senators who had been swiping on their mobile devices became entirely motionless. A visual recorder operator in the distant edge steadily focused closely upon Bondi's visage without receiving instructions to do so. "Senator," Bondi stated, and her tone had altered. Still restrained, yet conveying an underlying element currently, a quality that had been absent 20 minutes prior. "The Epstein issue entails exceptionally confidential details, casualties who warrant safeguarding, continuous judicial factors that." Then Kennedy stared directly at her and inquired the solitary query she remained unable to evade. "Who murdered him?" And those 4 terms exploded within the Senate hall like an object released from a massive elevation. Bondi gazed at him, her mouth separated. 0 terms emerged. She glanced downward, then upward again, purchasing time, yet there remained absolutely nothing more to express. The audio receivers captured a lone inhalation, absolutely nothing further. The media balcony remained utterly quiet. Kennedy paused. "Senator," The formal conclusion, I comprehend the formal conclusion. He remained stationary. His palms rested clasped upon the desk ahead of him. I am questioning you regarding what you reckon, because you viewed those documents, Attorney General. You possess admittance to details that the citizens of America lack. You pledged to them that you would supply them with the reality. He allowed that term reality to linger within the atmosphere separating them. Thus, I am questioning you one additional instance, human to human. Who murdered Jeffrey Epstein? What Bondi uttered subsequently will be debated for decades. It did not represent an admission. It did not represent a disclosure. It constituted a meticulous, legally sound non-reply that succeeded, via its intense caution, in verifying precisely what Kennedy had dedicated the previous 47 minutes constructing toward. She articulated that she remained unable to discuss subjects currently undergoing evaluation, which signified a singular truth. This investigation was not concluded. Bondi was not concealing the reality. She was clutching it. That constituted the giveaway. Not concluded, not terminated, not concealed in the manner they desired the public to accept. Kennedy gestured his head steadily, in the manner an individual gestures when they already possess the reply prior to asking the query. At what point do you reckon that evaluation will be finalized, Attorney General? Bondi adjusted her posture marginally. We are dedicated to an exhaustive and total procedure that, prior to my passing, Kennedy inquired pleasantly. The hall shattered, not into pandemonium, but into an abrupt, unintentional outward breath from 200 individuals concurrently. An individual in the rear genuinely chuckled, piercing and skeptical, before stopping themselves. Bondi refused to chuckle. Kennedy gazed at her for an extended duration. Next, he gazed directly into the nearest recording lens, with the visage of a male who had merely completed expressing everything he arrived here to express. To Bondi's rear, one aide ceased recording completely. An additional aide leaned forward and muttered a phrase no audio receiver could capture. Bondi refused to pivot. She merely gazed straight ahead, as though she already comprehended the harm was completed. The citizens of America have been anticipating the reality regarding Jeffrey Epstein for a prolonged duration, Attorney General. They have been instructed to exercise forbearance. They have been instructed the procedure consumes time. They have been instructed that correct protocols must be adhered to. He collected his documents steadily. What they have not been instructed, what you have neglected to instruct them today, is who resides within those documents, what those documents hold, and the reason why the most influential judicial officer in the American nation is unable to reply to a straightforward query concerning whether the most renowned inmate in American past genuinely took his own life. He snapped his writing instrument shut. I believe they warrant a reply. I believe you possess knowledge of what that reply is. He gazed at her one ultimate instance. And I believe the reality that you refuse to utter it during a live television broadcast reveals to us everything we require to comprehend. The session persisted for an additional 90 minutes. Alternate senators presented alternate inquiries. Bondi recuperated and provided calculated replies concerning a dozen varied subjects. Yet nobody inside that space was contemplating those alternate inquiries. They were contemplating 4 terms: who murdered Jeffrey Epstein? And the reply Pam Bondi declined to supply. Thus, presently, I desire to question you about an item. Do you reckon Epstein terminated himself, or was he quieted? Input self-termination or input murdered, and avoid evading it. Input self-termination or input murdered, because quietness of that nature does not occur unless something is being concealed, and that signifies where the narrative enters its most perilous state, because unaddressed inquiries possess a tendency of expanding grander than the responses that initially spawned them. Once skepticism takes root within the civic consciousness, every holdup turns dubious, every absent document turns significant, and every meticulously phrased declaration sounds less akin to lucidity and more akin to concealment. What Kennedy sparked within that hall was not merely a highly circulated instant, it represented the resurgence of examination. Within days, legislators representing both factions began detecting the transition. A few publicly demanded renewed revelations. Alternate individuals remained silent but internally indicated worry. Inside Washington, quietness frequently serves as its personal dialect. Bureaucrats who typically brushed off the Epstein topic as resolved were abruptly being questioned regarding it within corridors, lifts, and waiting areas prior to broadcast interviews. Personnel were instructed to ready discussion points. Public relations squads were instructed to observe reactions. The topic everyone assumed had diminished was currently back at the focal point of the space. For Bondi, the obstacle was no longer the session itself. It was what followed. A solitary, challenging dialogue can be overseen. Front-page news can be steered elsewhere. Media rotations can be endured. Yet a persistent inquiry, reiterated by millions of individuals, is more difficult to suppress. Every upcoming media briefing currently bore the peril of somebody inquiring about it anew. Every legislative showing risked an additional senator resolving to pursue Kennedy's trajectory. Every denial would be evaluated against the initial denial. And furthermore, there existed the documents. Those files had transformed into more than paperwork. They had transformed into emblems. To certain people, they symbolized concealed identities and shielded authority. To alternate individuals, they symbolized decades of systemic breakdown. Whether or not every whisper concerning them possessed truth nearly ceased to matter from a political standpoint. What held importance was that individuals reckoned replies resided somewhere inside closed portfolios, censored sheets, and secured holding chambers. Once the masses reckon reality is being hoarded rather than distributed, reliance commences to crumble. Prior detectives featuring on television attempted to appear guarded. They cautioned watchers that complicated investigations frequently entail privacy regulations, survivor safeguards, and valid judicial obstacles. They were not incorrect, yet their justifications crashed into an element more potent than protocol: instinct. Everyday individuals had observed a straightforward inquiry encounter a roundabout reply. That variety of instance is simple to comprehend without judicial education. Kennedy comprehended that. He avoided asking a complicated inquiry regarding laws or categorization criteria. He asked a mortal inquiry, who murdered him? 4 straightforward terms. 0 judicial terminology. 0 protocol labyrinth. An inquiry any individual observing from their residence could immediately grasp. That is what rendered it impactful. It compelled a topic hidden in red tape back into accessible speech. Certain insiders supposedly became irritated with Kennedy for that exact rationale. Institutions endure via complication, complicated schedules, stratified evaluations, strict interpretations, delayed distributions. Straightforwardness can be chaotic. Straightforwardness slices through structures designed to decelerate everything to a halt. And Kennedy, whether through intuition or strategy, had condensed decades of bewilderment into a single phrase nobody could erase from their memory. Concurrently, the civic dialogue continued expanding. If the Epstein topic remained undergoing evaluation, what precisely was undergoing evaluation? Fresh proof? Outdated accounts? Inner resolutions? Protection breakdowns? Prospective partners? Every prospective angle spawned 10 additional inquiries. The less the authorities detailed, the more fantasy occupied the void. That constitutes the peril of confidentiality within the current era. Details retained do not generate quietness. They generate hypotheses. For Bondi, there persisted a singular route that might alter the narrative: revelation. A lucid schedule, lucid borders, lucid rationales for what might and might not be distributed. However, revelation bears perils of its inherent nature, primarily when influential identities, systemic errors, or previous incorrect presumptions might be implicated, and thus the customary urge recurs: postpone currently, control subsequently. Nevertheless, postponement had already spawned the tempest she was residing within. Somewhere behind sealed barriers, consultants were intensely likely arguing over the identical query: distribute further and confront the ramifications, or distribute 0 and allow distrust to expand. Neither choice was pleasant. That represents what occurs when an issue overlooked for an excessive period turns public once more. Options constrict, penalties inflate, time ceases serving as a friend. And throughout it all, Kennedy remained predominantly quiet. 0 massive circuit of interviews, 0 theatrical subsequent addresses, merely the infrequent short comment that he desired, replies akin to everyone else. Yet quietness can be tactical. Additionally, by expressing minimal amounts, he permitted Bondi's quietness to persist as the most deafening noise within the narrative. So currently, the strain progresses onward. Additional sessions, additional solicitations, additional recording devices, additional opportunities for the identical inquiry to be posed by another individual within a different space beneath more intense illumination. Because once a single individual demonstrates a prohibited inquiry can be uttered audibly, alternate individuals typically pursue. And should that occur, the subsequent instance might hold importance even greater than the initial one. The initial instance, she was taken off guard. The subsequent instance, nobody will be, since readiness alters everything. The subsequent session, the subsequent interview, the subsequent corridor surprise exterior to a panel room will not arrive as a stunner. Bondi and every individual nearby her currently comprehend exactly what the masses desire to listen to, and precisely which inquiry can instantly command a space. That signifies the subsequent reply, whatever it might be, will be evaluated against dual entities concurrently, the quietness that preceded it and the readiness that followed it. Should she respond straightforwardly the next instance, individuals will inquire why she remained unable to respond earlier. Should she decline once more, individuals will inquire what became more difficult to express. Should she provide a meticulously designed compromise, both factions will assert it verifies their distrust. That represents the snare Kennedy constructed in live duration. He converted a solitary instance of pausing into an enduring anchor point. Every upcoming reaction presently resides inside its shade. Within Washington, bureaucrats comprehend a harsh reality regarding civic viewpoint. Ambiguity matures poorly. What appears governable for a single day turns dubious following a week, distressing following a month, and politically poisonous following a sufficient duration. Systems frequently presume focus will diminish. Occasionally it occurs. However, occasionally a solitary segment broadcasted an adequate amount of times maintains focus alive far exceeding what any consultant predicts. 11 seconds of quietness can endure longer than 11 months of discussion points. Concurrently, individuals adjacent to the structure probably commenced posing their personal inquiries. Did there exist evidence nobody predicted to turn pertinent once more? Did there exist identities that had never held weight politically yet hold weight currently? Were earlier resolutions forged for practicality currently transforming into vulnerabilities? Whenever examination returns to an outdated dispute, even individuals who previously felt secure can turn anxious. Outdated notes, outdated phone records, outdated selections abruptly hold weight anew. That represents why the Epstein narrative has continuously possessed extraordinary momentum. It is not merely regarding a single male or a solitary passing. It resides at the crossroads of affluence, clout, manipulation, confidentiality, and systemic faith. Incidents akin to that never vanish neatly. They persist, they anticipate, and whenever they recur, they frequently carry more than the initial inquiries back alongside them. They carry every unaddressed inquiry tethered to them. For the populace, the topic has grown grander than any solitary hypothesis. A segment accepts the formal narrative. A segment dismisses it wholly. A significant portion simply reckon they have never been informed sufficiently to decide. That ultimate faction might be the most crucial of everyone because they are not insisting upon a prearranged verdict. They are insisting upon faith within the procedure, and faith, once impaired, is arduous to reconstruct utilizing declarations merely. It typically necessitates proof. Kennedy comprehended an additional item. 2. Individuals are capable of enduring unfavorable information more effortlessly than they endure sensing deceived. An agonizing reality can be assimilated. A concealed reality spawns bitterness. That represents why his query impacted with such severity.